Welcome back to another edition of Live from Redhook here at the Function House. Tonight we want to welcome our special guest DJ Saliva Commandos.
Saliva Commandos is in the building.
What's up, man?
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. It's a pleasure.
Welcome down, man.
I'm a big
down.
fan of what you guys do here, man. This is a great space.
You like it?
I love it.
How'd you hear about us?
I was, you know what, I was on Facebook and I saw something that popped up with Hector Romero. And he was going live, and I checked it out, and I was like, wow, this is kind of like another place that I know that does it. I don't want to name their name. I was like, this is awesome. And I saw Hector, he did his thing, he got interviewed. I said, man, this is like the future of introducing DJs to the world, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, we love people coming down here. We love hearing their story. We love to find out, like, how did you get into the passion of DJing, you know?
Well, you know, I'm from the Bronx, the South Bronx, and when I was about 9 years old, my neighbor, they had DJ gear. This is back in, I'm gonna age myself, 78, 79, and they had DJ gear. And the guy next door, his name was Lucan. And I remember one time he knocked at my mother's door. He was like, you know, can your son come over? And I went over and I was watching them, and I was like amazed by this. Right. I was like, oh, I want to do this. But they didn't like teach me how to DJ. What they taught me was how to rhyme. I was terrible at it. But then fast forward like a year later, right outside, and I lived across from a school, 52, right outside, they were doing street jams. So that was my introduction. It was Rocksteady, Zulu Nation, and they were doing all these parties, and I would watch right from my fire escape, like a movie.
So you were a hip-hop guy coming up.
Originally, I'm a hip-hop guy, yeah. You know, my dad used to play Spanish music at home, but, you know, growing up, you want to fit with the kids in the neighborhood.
Right.
So the neighborhood was hip-hop. Disco was it was there, but it was hip-hop. For me, straight hip-hop, and that's how I started.
So who were some of the DJs that you were following back then, or that were like hot on the scene?
Well, back then I was too young to follow any DJs, but when I started to figure it out, it was like the world's famous DJs, the Supreme Team, African Bambaataa. Yep. Those guys, you know, and I remember in the 80s, you know, it went around the copy of the Cold Crush Brothers, like all those battles, and I would listen to that, and they would shout all the DJs out, Charlie Chase and all those guys. I was like, listen, man, that's what I want to do. So I actually followed, in the beginning of my career, or when I was starting, I followed hip-hop DJs only. And it wasn't until I found out who Louis Vega was, then that changed everything as far as like dance music for me. That just changed everything, you know.
Well, I mean, he's a legend, but I mean, the Bronx has produced some of the biggest DJs.
Yeah, there are tons of DJs. You know, a lot of the hip hop DJs. But when I kind of got introduced to like freestyle, originally it was freestyle, like before house music, you know, it was freestyle back in the 80s. He was like the guy who was doing it. So that's the guy who, you know, you would listen to him on the radio and you kind of want to emulate. And I was young. I was like, man, this guy's doing it. I want to do what he's doing. So that's the direction I started heading in. And then my sister is the one that introduced me to house music. She used to go to the Paradise Garage all the time. So she would bring back, like I would buy hip-hop records, but she's the one that would bring back all the Larry Levan stuff. Like the Man Friday, all that stuff that was being played at the garage, and she would play it at home, and I was like, what is this? I hated it. I hated it. I said, no one listens to that. She was like, this is what everyone's listening to where I go to. And it just grew on me, and I learned to really appreciate that sound.
So you had a direct link to the garage.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, I never went, but my sister would go like every weekend.
Right.
And she would come back and tell the stories of the punch bowl and the people dancing all night, dancing in the speaker, all this crazy stories.
What's the story with the punch bowl?
The punch bowl was you drink the punch bowl and you probably see like a purple elephant. I'm assuming, you know, it's the Paradise Garage. It is like late 70s, early 80s, you know, mid 80s.
So you were actually out DJing hip hop.
Yeah, you know, well, not in clubs. I was a bedroom DJ for a long time. I was like the neighborhood guy. And I'm noticing the trend with the old school DJs that it's always the one guy in the neighborhood that everyone knows. I was that guy.
Right.
You know, I was the guy in the neighborhood. Everyone was like, and I would go. I
Block
wasn't.
parties, right?
Yes, block parties, and I wasn't Saliva Commandos. That I evolved into Saliva Commandos. I used to use the name DJ George B. That's what people would call me in the neighborhood. It's like, yo, you got to get George B, man. He will play some good hip-hop beats. And that's what I would do. You know, I wasn't on 1200s yet. I couldn't afford them. So I was like on these rinky-dinky belt drives, but I made it happen. You know, you kind of get used to the belt.
If you can mix on belt drives, you can mix.
You can mix on anything.
Right? So
that's why.
And then once you probably switched over, it was like.
Oh, the techniques. It was like, the 1200s. I was in heaven.
It was like,
Yeah, it was like, wow, it doesn't wobble? This is amazing. You could stop it and it goes and comes back quickly. Oh, I was in heaven. I loved it.
That's great.
You know, that's as far as starting to DJ, it was hip hop, and I slowly evolved into freestyle, then house music.
So what clubs were you working in New York when you switched into the house?
When I switched over, actually, before I got to the clubs, I really started at Hunter College, and I'll explain to you. They have a radio station, it's WHCS, and the main guy there was Disciple, DJ Disciple. So as I was entering school, I saw they had the station. I was like, oh, I got to go check this out. Yeah, I need to take over this place or try. But I heard he was there, and he was leaving. I said, this is perfect. He leaves, I come in.
Right.
So that's exactly what happened. Disciple left, and I stepped in, and I was able to pick up where he left off at Hunter College. So I started doing all the parties there, and it was doing the parties that I got a lot of DJ gigs. You know, small little clubs. There wasn't anything big. It wasn't later until like the mid-'90s where I ended up at like the tunnel at the Limelight, but my name was never on the flyer. It was like, yo, can you fill in for me? I was like, yeah. So I was that guy. Can you fill in for me? I was the filling guy.
That's how it starts.
That's
right?
how it starts, yeah.
You fill in for somebody,
and then
they stop showing up,
and then
you
you try to get the gig. Unfortunately, that didn't happen for me. but I tried. You know, I would try all the time. Then I ended up at a record store, and it was another transition. The record store was called DJ Specialty in the Bronx. The guy who used to work there was Hector Romero.
Oh, yes, he actually mentioned it on his interview.
Yeah, so he used to work there, and he used to sell me records. And I would go in, and I was like, listen, if I'm going to get a job and I'm still in school, this is the job to have. So I found out he was leaving. I did the same thing. I strolled right in. I spoke to the owner. He said, well, Hector's leaving. You can take over. I took over, and that was the job to have. I DJ'd all day.
Yeah, and plus you network with a lot of DJs.
Network, everyone would come through.
You get your hands on the records.
Yes, and I had all the new
everybody's
vinyl, everything. I was able to order the stuff, so I knew what was coming out. I got introduced to a lot of up-and-coming producers. One was Armand, not physically, but through the work. I was like, who is this cat? And at that point, what I was actually doing is I was just going to school because I was studying the productions, which led me into production. Studying everyone's work, Masters at Work, Armand, everyone that was coming through, all the tracks, I would listen to them. And I was like, all right, DJing is dope, but I need to make my own music. And that's how I kind of moved into music production.
What year was this?
This is probably 92, 93.
So what were you working with at that time?
As far as production stuff?
Yeah.
I had an Akai. An Akai?
950?
No. It was the SO1 with like 6 seconds. And if you guys know, 6 seconds, that's not a lot to work with. So what I would do is I would use it on my DJ set. I would do mixtapes, and I would just use it to trigger stuff. Then at the store, I started meeting other producers, and they're the ones that told me about a sequencer. You can use MIDI. I had no idea what MIDI was. And they introduced it. They introduced me to MIDI, and I was able to start buying gear that I can afford. And the first keyboard that I purchased was the Casio FZ1 that had like 36 seconds, I think, or something like that.
So that must have felt like an eternity.
And I could just really truncate the kicks. I was like, wow, I'm in heaven now. Then I bought another one, and I invested in an MMTA Alessis to sequence, and that's it. I took off from there. The rest is history, yeah. I was able to produce. What I would do is a lot of my friends were going to the clubs, and they would invite me, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to stay home tonight. And I would just stay home and study. That's what I was doing. I was home studying, making beats all night and to the morning, because obviously my day job didn't start until like 11.
Right.
So that's all I was doing. That's how I was honing my craft in my bedroom at home in the Bronx.
So
what was the first track that you dropped?
Yeah.
Oh, the first that I got signed?
Yeah.
The first track, it was with a friend of mine. His name is Fernando Baez, and he went under the moniker Miss Fernando. The song is called Serve, and we signed it to Progressive High Records. And the way I got that song signed was I had a bag. This is for you young cats. This is old school. I had my knapsack with tons of cassettes. And I had a book, I think it was from DMA. And because I had access to the record store, I knew where all the labels were. I jumped on the 4 train and went to every label, knocked on every door.
Hustling, I like it.
Hustling. And I
Yeah.
would give, and the best is when you would give the cassette and they wouldn't open the door. And they'd be like, thank you. Close the door. And I was like, damn. So my last stop was Progressive High, which was Northcott. So I knocked on the door, and the cassette was for Henry Street. The guy who opened the door was Jack D. Elliott. And he's like, I was like, yo, I'm here for Henry Street. I want to give him this demo. He's like, I'll give it to them. He took the demo. I jumped on the train. When I got home, my mother was like, there were no cell phones back then. My mother was like, someone just left a message for you. A Jack? I was like, what? I called him up. He was like, yo, we want to sign that song. So I was like, wow, this is great. So that's how I got my first song.
You must have been jumping up and down.
I was jumping up and down because everyone was like, people would root against you. They were like, you're not going to get signed the first time. I was like, you never know.
Yeah.
And it happened.
So you went with your cassette, bringing it for Henry Street.
For Henry Street, and Progressive took it. And I did a couple of remixes for them. That was great. And it kind of, things were starting to happen. Then it kind of fizzled. Then I went back home. And I started working again. I started going out, listening to Hex Hector and Junior Vasquez. One night I went home. I listened to Junior. I was at, I think, Arena. I was listening to Junior. I was like, man, he's playing some dope tribal drums. So I went home, and I started sampling. I'm a great sampler, so I started finding all the drums, went through all his records. I was like, oh, he has dope kicks. So I truncated everything, and I laid out this entire track, which was later called Serial Buff. My friend Fernando Baez, at the time, I wasn't Saliva Commandos yet, he came over and he had a sample from the movie Serial Mom. He's like, yo, listen to this. And I listened to it. I said, that's crazy because I have a song that might fit. And I put it on the song. He used to work at 8-Ball Records. He took it to 8-Ball Records. We got it pressed, a test pressing. Junior Vasquez got his hands on it, played it the next night. And I got it signed after that.
Wow, that's great. I mean, because he was always hanging out in 8-Ball Records. So is that how?
Yes, that's how it
that's
happened.
how he got
Fernando
it. Fernando
would see him all the time.
Yeah.
Fernando was like, if I can get this to Junior, and he put it in his bin. Then I went on a Sunday. A friend of mine rolled in from Arena and said, yo, Junior just played your song. I said, oh, this is the beginning of something great. And it just rolled. It rolled. It was great. Hex Hector came to the store looking for the song. I mean, good things started to happen. And, you know, I built from that. And once again, things fizzled.
And this was around like.
This is 96, 97.
97, yeah.
98. And, you know, and after that, I did a couple of things. I did a remix for Strictly. And then things fizzled. And I went through this stage where I was like questioning what I was doing, you know. People weren't picking up my songs. And I felt like at the time, I know what I'm doing. How can you not want to take my music?
Right.
But I don't think I was doing my homework. So then I got a couple of things signed. Then 2 years ago, I sat down and I said to myself, you know what? You know, now because of the digital world, you can go on TrackSource. You can do this from home. You know, you can go on TrackSource, iTunes, and listen to everyone. So I said, you know what? Let me go back to the drawing board. Let me get rid of everything I was doing.
Right.
And let me start fresh. So I went on TrackSource and I started listening to all the hot producers. What are they doing right? What am I doing wrong? So I decided to create a song called Off a Murd, which was big for me. And just by trying to be original, using original drums and not using what everyone else was using. And the song came out like a year ago, I think, and it did superb for me. And you know, that's the song that really put me here on this couch right here with you guys.
Yeah.
You know.
And how different is it putting out music today than it was when you were doing it back then?
Oh my God.
Like, talk to us about that.
I'll tell you this. I would sit there with tons of gear with my 2 FZs and you know, and trying to just go through records and sampling. I was a big sampler. I didn't have a large library. And I learned from other producers, you make your own library if you want to be original. So I would make my own library. I would go through all the records, get all the kicks I wanted, the snares. So that was then. Now I use Logic. Been using it for about 7 years. I love it. I mastered it. They have a dope library. I can change their sounds, and I can work on a laptop. Mix on my Genelec speakers, and listen, you could do everything on the internet. Get it mastered. You don't have to ship it out. Everything is done. I sit home.
You don't have to go door to door.
No, door to door. I'm sitting there drinking coffee, watching Netflix, going, "Oh, my mastering come in? No, it hasn't come in yet." So it's, you know, it's easier now.
Yeah.
It's easier for someone like myself. For the new guys coming up, I don't think they have that foundation. Now, I'm not going to knock what they do. What they do is a little different, but
Right.
you know, where we come from is a little old school. You know, the bootstrap, strap them up, make it work, go out, work hard. They have it a little easier than we did, but you know, it's all good. It's about creativity. So
Well, now you have your own label also.
without a doubt, I have a label called In Command Records, and if anyone wants to purchase anything, you go to TrackSource, iTunes. I'm everywhere on the internet. Facebook, we're on Facebook. Yeah, so we have I have a lot of cool tracks on there. The latest thing that I just put out is called the Saliva Commandos DJ Drum Tool. That's
Right.
doing very well. It's on the beat. It's like a top 10 on the beats and DJ tools. I just had a song remixed by Rocco from France, who's a dope producer, and Gabe and DJ Theo. They did a remix for my song called Sochesico, which did very well, and I decided to have it remixed, and that's doing well too. It's also charting.
So what is it like, you know, because a lot of people want to start their own record labels,
Right.
and this is the first time that you started your own label.
Yes, I said, let me just go for it.
So what is it like to start your own record label for people out there that may be interested in doing it? I mean, obviously, today it's a lot different than it was back
Right.
then because, I mean, there's obviously still overhead, but the overhead's a little bit different because you're not pressing records and you're not doing stuff like that.
Right.
So what goes into starting a record and then a record label and then getting your tracks, say, to a Beatport or a track
Right.
source? How does that work?
Well, the way it works for me is that obviously I'm a one-man show, so I do everything myself.
Right.
So no overhead. What I do is I do all the production myself. I have a distribution deal with Label Works,
Okay.
so they distribute all my stuff to all the digital outlets.
You mix down your own records also.
I mix all my music. The only thing I don't do is master. But you know, for some people who want to start their own label, I mean, it's very possible. And I'll tell you why I started mine. I started mine because I was at a point where you need to, you know, everyone that you give stuff to, they tell you, nah, it's all right. And you know in your heart, you go, I think this is good. I believe in this. It's all right. So I said, you know what, I'm going to make my own label, put my own stuff out, and I'll show you it's I. And that's what happened. The stuff started to come out, and it did very well. But, you know, I think that if you want to start your own label, it's good to know music production. Unless you're gonna start signing artists, that's a whole nother venture that I'm not into right now. I put out the label just to get my own work out there.
Right.
No other artist on your label.
No other artists. I just have a couple of remixers, but I really created the label out of necessity to get myself out there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of hard. You know, I don't want to sound cruel or anything, but I don't want to deal with other artists. I just want to get my stuff out there.
Right.
I'm trying to promote myself. You know, that's why I really have the label.
Yep. Yep.
How often are you putting music out?
I put something out every month, 1 or 2 tracks. I mean, every month. I've been doing that for about 13 months.
So you must be sitting on a lot of tracks.
I have tons of tracks I'm working on. As a matter of fact, I have stuff out now on a label called Double Cheese, because I'm always working. I have a new track coming out called Afro House on Uncover Records, a company based out of Italy. Let me see, a couple other things. And I have, for next month, I have a song coming out on In Command Records that's not ready yet. I'm mixing it. It's called Nap Your Hands. Instead of Clap Your Hands, it's called Nap Your Hands. And that'll be coming out sometime maybe in January. So
Wow.
that's what I have lined up for next year.
So how much time are you spending in the studio on a weekly basis?
I work a little differently than a lot of people. I don't go in and do like 5-hour studio sessions. That's not how I work. What I do is I start an idea, I sit on it, come back to it, listen to it, add more to it, and I normally produce a track in like a week.
Okay.
And I keep going back to it. Sometimes I get lucky and go, oh, this is a gold mine quickly. So I spend a lot of time on it so I can just finish it. And I separate from it, go back, listen. But I work pretty fast, about a week.
Are there particular guys that you will give your tracks to have them tested out in like places?
Oh, without a doubt. I send stuff. It's funny. I send stuff to Hector Romero. I send stuff to Louis Vega. Let me see, to the Forward Disco Boys.
Right.
And there are a couple other cats that I send to, but those are like the main guys that I know that if they like it, they'll play it. And if they don't play it, it's fine. I don't expect them to play it. But if they test it for me, and it always comes back to you, especially with social media.
Yeah.
So when it's like, yo, someone just played your song, that's the cool part. It always
Yep.
comes back to you, and it's immediate feedback.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I kind of give it to those cats and see if they're.
And they're always
like
playing
it.
in good spots where they have
Oh,
good crowds, where you can
yes.
really get a good judge of what the song
right.
is.
If something is going to work or
Yeah,
if it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
going to work. You
Sure.
know. Totally.
So going into your sets, are you planning stuff out? Like when you have a gig, do you go through your library and play and have like a certain thing set up?
Not really. I work a little differently. I'm kind of organic. I have a template. I'll make a list of kind of things that I want to play, but as I start to play, I kind of venture off on other playlists. Like here's a little different because we have a small audience, so I can kind of play whatever I want. I'm not really trying to get people to dance, but when I play a set for a live crowd, I kind of read the crowd and know, well, this song is not working with this crowd, and I switch up real fast to see if I grab them. Once I grab them, then I continue with that flavor. If it's Afro house, tech, deep house.
Yep.
That's kind of how I work.
So what do you have set up for us tonight?
Tonight, you're going to hear a lot of In Command stuff. I have a couple of tracks that I wanted to play, new stuff, and I'm just going to flow. You might hear some old school house. You never know. I might do some 90s, some 80s. I'm just going to flow and have fun.
All right, great.
Well, we're looking forward to it, man. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you for having me, man. This is a blast. I told you guys I'm big fans. The Function House, guys. The
Yeah.
Function House.
All right,
That's
we're
what's
going to
up.
take a 2-minute break. We're going to get Saliva Commandos up on the decks. Peace.
Peace.